Hey there, it's Phil with another GEPHI data analysis tutorial. I'm working with a different data set this time, so I'm going to open from a recent session. I didn't save it or anything, so I haven't done anything with this yet, so it's just the raw data. I've just previously looked at it. So this data set has to do with the 2023, May 2023 Roe v. Wade context. So we'll dive into like what exactly is the data that we're collecting as we open this up. So I'm just choosing that data set, and GEPHI is going to say, well, here's exactly what you're importing. What kind of graph type do you want? Are you going to append an existing workspace, or are you going to make a new one? Which is what I want to do. There's nothing here anyway, so I'm not appending. And then it's giving me some general information about how many nodes and edges are in this data set that I'm importing here. So if I go ahead and bring that in, looks like we've got quite a bit of data with some outlying, specific nodes out here making connections to this larger data set. So really what I want to do here, in this circumstance, like I'm being given this data set, and I wasn't part of the collection process, so I have to make sense out of this data set now, and then configure GEPHI to additionally help me make more specific sense out of the information that I want to. Once I understand overall the information that I have here, then I can use all of GEPHI's attributes and features to sort of narrow things down into specific information that is worthwhile for my research and my intents and purposes. So I think it'll be worthwhile to go ahead and just sort of look through the workspace and the different tools that are available to you here. And then we'll start talking about the appearance and potentially some more about the layout and everything like that. So we've got these big connection points that are connecting with the larger individual data sets there. So maybe this would make a little bit more sense, or you'd be able to make notice of some of the things that I want to show you if I zoom in just a little. So you see all these lines these edges that are making connections from nodes to nodes here, right? Now, over here, I can center on the graph. So if I get like in the weeds, zooming in somewhere weird, I can just hit this and center myself on, and it kind of just, it configures the appearance of everything to show me all the information that's there, right? So if I get really deep into a cluster of nodes somewhere, and I really need to just quickly jump back to the overall view, let's do that again. So if I get really intense on a particular area of nodes or something like that, trying to make sense of all these connections, and then I need to bounce back, I can hit that little magnifying glass tool, and then I get brought back to my, my broad landscape view of the entire data set. Okay, if I start going through and messing with colors, this is my reset colors button. I think that's pretty self-explanatory what that will do. And then we have labels, whether or not labels are visible or not. And what color are those going to be, right? So down here, it's going to toggle basically between, they have this in like a lot of software these days, it's like toggling between light mode and dark mode. So that's what this light bulb is for. It says background color, left click to switch to black and white, and right click to choose color. So I'm going to left click, and it's going to change my background, and then again I'll hit the magnifying glass to get me back to center. And I know that we haven't even really dove into what information is being provided to us here, but notice that there's another larger node in here amongst the data set that's, that coming into you know, a data set like this and not really having too much information about it makes me wonder, like, how does this fit, right? But I also think that this this black and white mode, I guess as it were called, helps in some ways to visualize, especially these connections, because then I can take, you know, I can hover over, say, this sort of pink node right here that does have a few connections, but it's harder to see them. But then this black and white mode, once I highlight, I'm really just hovering over that node, then it's showing me those connections in a much brighter sort of way. So I think that this sort of method, or this background, works a lot better if I'm just trying to like really visualize overall where the connections are being made from specific nodes. That works pretty well. Let's see what, if I right click, it's going to change to color. And then I can choose colors. I think what I'll have to do is left click to go back to where it was, and then right click. And then I have the full palette, right? So let's move around to something we don't have much of, which is like an orange kind of color. And we'll do more of like a brighter. There we go. Let's see what happens when we do that. So this is just changing my specific background. And you know, you can understand how that might be helpful based on the color schemes that you choose for everything else. It helps you allow some of these connections to stand out a little bit more. So I'm gonna left click to go back, and then I might left click one more time to go to the black background. So this tool right here is going to allow me to take a screenshot of the information here. You know, there's different ways to go about this. You know, there's the actual, you know, I'm working on a Windows computer right now, so there's a Windows, you know, print screen sort of method of taking a screenshot, and then, you know, this is going to, you know, really capture a particular moment and configuration of what you've got going on here. And it's going to provide a little more information than just a traditional still screenshot. I have gone through this process, and just like other functions in GEPHI, it will you'll see a progress bar in the bottom right, and it takes a while actually to do this, because there's what's being represented here is actually a significant amount of data. So to take a screenshot and make sense out of all that and have it be workable actually takes quite some time. So I'm not actually going to go through the function, because out of fear of the computer getting hung up while I try to do other things. Okay, so this is going to show me the node labels. Now, because there's so much, that might take quite a long time, right? That's why when I click it, it's like, well, I'm thinking about it, but now I can't zoom or do any other things. So show edge labels. Edges have source node color. Can toggle that. This one is just having the show the edges at all. So if I click this, it's going to remove all of this information here. Whoop. So I think actually what's happening here is I'm doing too much too fast, because GEPHI is having a hard time keeping up with me. But there we go. So now it's zooming in with me. Kind of lost it there for a second. So you can see that I've removed the edges. So now you just see the nodes, and then you say, hey, well, what are these nodes that I'm working with? And then show the edges again. I think what GEPHI was having such a hard time with was here when I said show the node labels, because there's so many nodes, right? So it was struggling to keep up with that. So here's the edge weight scale, showing me more intensely those edges. So that's just a preference on how to visualize those connections. size and color of font. And you can change the font to be whatever you want, and the size and the bold and all that stuff. But again, when you have such a large data set with so many nodes and things, that's really sort of that's bogging down the whole system a little bit. And then you can sort of make preferences and say, well, what attributes are we going to display as labels? So depending on what data, what information you're really analyzing from this data set, you can make selections as to what information you want to look at in regards to both nodes and edges. Okay, so far so good. That's pretty cool stuff. I also, I think before we work into any of this extra appearance information, I'm going to choose a different layout to expand the visualization here. So I'm going to zoom way out because I know that when I choose a new layout here, all of this existing visualization stuff is going to sort of explode a little bit. I'm going to choose I'm going to do a horrible job of pronouncing this, the Yifan Hu layout. I've sort of noodled around with this a little bit, and here's the properties of this particular layout. And you can of course come in here and you can make adjustments to this to make it more specific. Maybe you want to use this as sort of a preset to get most of the way there, and then you want to make some specific changes if you know what you're looking for, or know the visualization that will be most helpful to you. But here I'm just going to go with that preset layout and let things run, and then watch GEPHI do its thing, which is just so satisfying to watch, actually. So we see the bulk of the data set is being expanded, so we're going to be able to better visualize the individual connections between these nodes, meaning the edges, right, between them. But I'd also like to point out, especially because of this black and white, look at how you see these colors, like the ring of red, and how you can kind of see that evolve and cluster. And it makes me wonder, well, what is this information right here? So just this visualization itself can spur some curiosity about, well, what is this? It looks like, the storm on Jupiter or something like that. It's like, well, what is that information there? And is it worth exploring more? Okay, so it took about, 30 seconds or so for this layout to run its course. And now I've got it. And just like before, let's say that I'm really interested in what's going on in that storm, so to speak. Look at all those red nodes there and the connections that are being made. So something of interest happened there, and then I have to make sense out of that data. But then again, if it's just sparking curiosity, and I'm just doing an overview of this this configuration of this data. I'm just making a mental note, that's worth exploring. But now that I've identified something and I'm not going to deep dive into it yet, then I just center on the graph, bring myself back out to center so I can see the entire data set again. You can also see, if we're still talking about this red ring here, there's other clusters of that you can just see. So here's another. So again, what is already preset as red nodes that is worth looking at? And you can find some of that information by looking up here at the appearance. And this will allow me to make some changes to, again, how I'm visualizing all this information. So let's say that I want to partition, and I'm going to choose an attribute. This is a piece of the information. And I guess, you know what? I'm going to have to back up just a little bit. Before I go into all that, we're going to take a second to, right now we're looking at the overview of the data set. Let's look at the data laboratory. And this will take a second to load up and everything. But this is the actual information that has been imported into GEPHI. This was all scraped from Twitter and other social media platforms. Whoever collected this data, Dr. Gajala and her research team, it's telling me what Twitter type. These are hashtags, these are tweets, right? This is media. You can see PBS on there, and then of course you can expand these things so you can better visualize where it's coming from. And you can, of course, I'm sure you can move these columns around so you can kind of customize this to your liking. And then you have all of these different options down here. Create a Boolean column. I mean, really important, useful things here if you are familiar with, just what you want or what you're looking for. We've got timestamps, super important. All of this information is what's being brought into those nodes and edges in the visualization. So all this information is originally brought in as a spreadsheet and then saved in a GEPHI format, and then distributed to people like me, so I can open up a GEPHI workspace and take a look at all this information. So that gives you an idea of what the actual data is that's being represented here. So we're working with nodes instead of edges. You can work with both of them. I'm going to look at this partition spot in particular. We also have rankings, which is about how many followers does a person have. We'll get into that. But first, what I want to do is just look through what my options are as far as attributes. Created at, description, email, emoji alias, emoji HTML, followers, friends, location, country, possibly sensitive. Now this possibly sensitive part reminds me of doing some data analysis work with a different tool called Netlytic. Specifically, what I was looking at there was analyzing affectual information from YouTube comments. And so there would be a pre-existing Excel file that had information that were specific words that would be deemed as toxic or as profanity, right? So some of the research that I was doing was trying to decide if there was a correlation to the quantity of negative, toxic comments in YouTube videos and the type of content that was created by the creators. But you have to understand that things like that are subjective, right? So whoever was creating the Excel spreadsheet that housed all the data that was saying, all these words will classify as toxic or as profanity or as negative sentiment. There might be some shared feelings about that, but it's also subjective in nature. So, you have to at least be aware of that as you're using that particular attribute to analyze data. So anyway, let's go through here and say, let's do location. And right away, it gives me a long list of locations that correlate with the information that was brought in with this data set. So you can see that 391 elements, or 3.04% of our data set, comes from the United States. And now some of 1.28% is described as coming from the USA, which is the United States, right? So really those should be combined, but they have two different colors here. So I could change this to be the same color here. So that's kind of what I want to do. I'm clicking on the color, and I want to say, well, that should be green. And I wonder if I can't quite duplicate the color, so I got to get them close myself. See, so now I'm, at least, since I know that those two are actually sort of accidentally attributed differently just because of the spelling, I want to make sure that they show up in a similar color. Now, when I pull up, when I click the link here for palette, and it'll say all gray, all white. I could generate something random, or I could look at palettes like this. And it's kind of like giving prioritization, like different color schemes for the highest percentages of this long list. Because if we go back and we look at this list, you know, I've got colors for the first 8 attributes or so, first 8 or 10, and then everything else is going to be gray because there's such an insignificant amount, 0.01% of our information coming from all these different places. But there's a lot. But a significant amount are coming from these places. And if the location of where this communication is taking place is important to my research, then I want to prioritize these heavy hitters here. So I could choose a palette and it'll change those colors for me. And maybe I want a different palette that looks, or maybe only the top 3 are most important to me, right? So it's going to give me those specific things. Let's say top 5. So I want to get Los Angeles and California in there. So we'll do top 5. So we've got these different colors, and I'm going to hit apply, and you're going to notice that the nodes here should start changing color to reflect this. So let's see. We may have to zoom in to find them all. Or it may still be working. Ah, yes. So you have to zoom in nice and close to find them. So now I'm able to, you know, better pinpoint. Here, let's remove the edges briefly. So then you can kind of see this cluster of like, well, where is this information coming from? Anything gray is outside of what I'm interested in, at least based on, you know, my noodling around here. So I'm interested in what's coming from the United States and specifically knowing what's coming from California or something. So here I'm able to see all that. If I zoom back out, you can see those clusters looking like galaxies of information here. Really interesting. So there's a specific way that you can apply color to your visualizations to, you know, particular attributes of your nodes. Now you can do the same things for edges, and you can also do rankings, meaning in degree, out degree, you know, how many followers a person has. So I guess you could, you know, visualize how much influence a particular, you know, user is having on the subject or something like that. That might be an interesting way to approach this. You also have the same options to the edges. So let's bring our edges back. And I should be able to visualize all of these different types of edges. So let's do that. Ooh, so pretty. So now you get a better idea of like, well, okay, well, who from where is doing what type of thing, right? And then of course you can turn some of these on and off so you're only looking at particular things, but that's really helpful actually to know users from particular locations that I'm interested in are making these types of, taking these types of actions on Twitter to interact with this particular topic. So we've got tweets and hashtags and retweets from specific people, quotes and quotes from, right? This is all really useful. You just have to know what you're looking at. So being able to dive into all of this, these nodes and edges and the palettes that are associated with them is going to help you make a lot more sense out of all your information here in GEPHI. All right, I hope all this information was useful for you guys. It's useful for me to talk through it. So I encourage you to find a data set and explore around in GEPHI and just become, familiar with all of these different options that you have, and just explore around a little bit so you understand a little bit more of what it's capable of doing. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you around.